You picked an awesome week to be here because we're in our last week of a series called It's Just Alot. And we've been talking about how we can look for God when we're overwhelmed with stress and worry. Today, we're gonna talk about something that's both exciting and also sometimes stressful, and that's the future. And so when you think of the future, what are some of the things that come to your mind? Now, when I was in middle school, I dreamed that I was going to be a doctor and I was gonna take care of lots of sick people. I thought at the time, I was like, okay, in the future, I'm gonna have a robot companion. His name's gonna be Medbot. It would have been a little bit like Baymax from Big Hero 6.
Are you satisfied with your care?
But instead of just treating patients, it would also do all the other work that I didn't want to do as well. And so then on top of being a doctor, I'd have this smart house.
Strawberry smoothie?
Certainly, Angie. Ta-da!
It cooked for you, cleaned for you, did everything. And so in short, my dream for the future involved me getting out of having to do pretty much any work. Thinking about the future is fun and exciting when you get to daydream like that, where you get to imagine the best possible scenario. But it can sometimes feel like a lot too. There are sometimes things that we're gonna worry about. Maybe not things like zombies and alien invasions from outer space, but things like, what classes am I gonna take next year? Will I have friends in them? Will I ever grow to be taller than my mom? And here's the thing about the future. It's unknown. We actually have no way of knowing what's gonna happen in the future. And I bet it's safe to say that we all want to know more about the future. And that's because while the future can be exciting, it also causes us stress because we don't know what's coming next. And so for some of us, there's things that you might hope will be different. Maybe you're going through something right now, your home life isn't great, and you worry that maybe it's never gonna get better. Maybe you don't have a lot of friends and you feel alone, and you're afraid that you'll never find people who are gonna accept you or understand you. Maybe you learn differently from other people, and you wonder if that's ever gonna get easier or if there's ever gonna be a way that you can learn like everyone else. Whatever it is, what you're nervous about is the future. Because you're worried that the future's gonna come and it's not gonna change the things that you don't like or bring about the things you wanna see. And for others of you, it might be the exact opposite. Maybe your stress about the future has to do with the fact that you don't want things to change. And so here's the thing, and it's just the truth, is the future is coming. It's gonna be filled with things that are really good, but the future's also gonna have some really difficult things that will also come our way. And I don't know about you, when I think about those difficult things, that can be really stressful. And so the question is, how are we supposed to face a future that we don't have control over? How do we remain stress-free right now when we have no idea what the future is going to look like? And so there's actually an incredible experience recorded in the Bible that I think can really help us out here. So there's these two guys that were in a situation where they had absolutely no control over what's going to happen next. And I think when we look at their story, we can learn a lot by watching the way they handled the stress that their uncertain future brought. And so the two guys I'm talking about are named Paul and Silas. See, they had dedicated their lives to traveling from city to city to share the good news about Jesus. And their journey is recorded in a book in the New Testament called Acts. And during their ministry, they had ended up being beaten and thrown into prison. Now, this wasn't any normal prison. It wasn't one where it's like, hey, you had the opportunity to get privacy or just be on your own. But the jailer that put Paul and Silas in prison, he put them in the innermost cell with their feet chained so they couldn't even move around, and a guard that stood watch over them at night so that they couldn't escape. I mean, that feels like a lot. In that super stressful situation, we can learn what to do by watching what Paul and Silas did. And so let's find out. It's in Acts 16, verse 25. It says this: about midnight, Paul and Silas were praying. All right, let's pause. So even if you're not sure about God, I think that some of us would probably be sending up desperate prayers in that situation. When we're stressed out, we might go to God even if we're uncertain of if he's going to respond to us. And it might sound a little bit like this, like, God, would you help me get out of this mess? God, could you do something here? God, help me. Sound familiar? I'm sure that all of us at a certain time have prayed prayers like this in stressful situations. And I think Paul and Silas were probably praying some prayers that were like that, but they were praying different prayers as well, because their prayers sounded more like hope. And how I know this is what happens in the rest of that verse. And so it says this. Let's look back at that. It says, about midnight, Paul and Silas were praying and singing hymns to God. That last line says it all. These guys were full on singing while they were chained up in prison, being watched during the night so that they couldn't escape. They were getting beaten for their faith. Their future looked like anything but hopeful. And yet in the middle of facing a difficult, stressful situation, they chose joy in the middle of an uncertain future. They chose to pray and to praise. And I think there's an important lesson in that for us, is that you can choose joy over worry. Paul and Silas had no control over their current circumstances, and they had even less control over what was going to happen in the future. And so instead of choosing to just live in that stress and in that fear and in that hopelessness, they chose to faithfully follow Jesus and choose joy. They chose to turn to God, who they trusted with their present and with their future. And I know this doesn't take the question about your future away immediately, but I do think it can help us navigate the stress we feel in unknown circumstances. It can help us remember that every day we can choose joy over worry. So how can you choose joy when you are feeling stressed and worried? Well, here's where I would start. First, you got to know what you're worried about. So when I say choose joy, I'm not saying just sweep everything under the rug, put on a fake smile and pretend that you're fine when you're definitely not. It's important to know what it is that you're worried about. And then we have to remember what God can do. Paul and Silas could choose joy because they'd experienced God's faithfulness, his goodness, and his love many times up to this point. So when their backs were literally against the wall, they weren't left wondering if God would provide, or if God cared, or how God might be faithful to them. Instead, they could remember the ways they had seen God show up in the past, and they could have hope that God would do the same in the future. And that's what I want you to do too. When you're worried about what's ahead, or stressed about something you don't know is going to happen, look back. Remember how God has been faithful to you in the past to help you to choose joy, both today, but also in the future. And then lastly, be grateful. One of the best things that we can do when we're worried is to practice gratitude. Look for things to be thankful for, even in the middle of your stress. Big or small things, it doesn't matter. Be thankful for them all. The more thankful you are, the more joy you'll see show up as a result. Remember that choosing joy isn't a quick fix. I'm not asking you to pretend you're okay when you're not. I get that sometimes choosing joy doesn't feel even possible. And when that happens, it's important to know that you may need help. So talk to an adult you trust. That can be a great first step, especially when stress and worry might be something more like depression and anxiety that just won't go away. Think back to Paul and Silas. Remember what they did when it was really difficult for them. They chose to worship and to pray. These are practical ways that they chose joy, and we can do the same. So, what's one way you can choose joy this week? So great to be with you guys. Catch you next time.